Hi, I'm Carlos Sanchez. I'm director at Sanchez Benton Architects, and I'll be presenting our project at Peveril Gardens and Studios. This is Peveril Tower in 2017. The project is a result of an open competition that we entered in 2017 with Mexican artist Gabriel Kuri. And the brief was to do a project to revitalize the public realm around the Bricklayers Arms roundabout in Southwark. We chose this semi-derelict structure, which was composed of garages on the ground floor and a raised podium garden, kind of late modernist. But it was in complete disuse, and we thought it could become a real public building. As you can see here, it was totally neglected. It was leaking. There was issues with drugs around it, homelessness, and the upstairs was just completely failing and kind of not really loved. But a bit of background, because what's important about the building is maybe that this area of London has historically been an entry point from the road coming in from Kent, from Canterbury, as a stopping point in and out of London. So this is sort of 1690s. On our site there was a pub, Meeting Fields, and that pub was called the Bricklayers Arms. That's where the roundabout takes us now. Fast forward till 1963. This is the pub. And here you see the pub at the top end of the Old Kent Road. Before the area was completely damaged by the bombs. So this is Peveril Tower and Peveril Podium Garden in 1964. And as you can see, it was built within the terraces. And this is the raised podium looking out towards the terraces that they were badly damaged by bombing. But in 1972, the pub had lived through the Second World War, but it didn't survive the kind of traffic engineers of the 1970s. And there was a huge clearance of the area. So this is the same map with the pub dotted down here and Peveril Gardens here at the top. But this move completely transforms the setting for Peveril House. It moves from being an object within a terrace to being a freestanding object on the edge of a big public void in the city. This is views of this new traffic infrastructure, probably taken from Peveril House. And this is an overlay that demonstrates this complete transformation in character that this building suffers. So we did a model for the competition. We thought that there was a few quite important moves that we wanted to make, and we proposed making a new public stair that connected the roof garden to the city. We wanted to empty out the ground floor and give it a public program. And we also wanted to richly plant that garden, make it a space for all. Gabriel had this idea that we should make a vertical move through a bit of planting. At the competition stage, it was a palm tree. There was this idea of maybe an oasis on the route in and out of London, and this is part of the model. But we tested it. We tested everything at a 1 to 20 scale, and we knew we had to be thrifty because of the budget of the project. So we were interested in seeing the waterproofing of the garden could be utilized as a kind of very bold color. This is the model that eventually went into the competition. And as with every project that we do, we always test the projects at the city scale. So we drew this project very well, and we started thinking about what impact could the building have on its surroundings. And we imagined that eventually it could start animating and helping the roundabout. And in this case, we drew the roundabout as a three-sided roundabout, where the central gardens suddenly become reachable by pedestrians and utilized. And after we won the competition, we started talking to Nigel Dannett, a horticulturalist whose work is very well known in the UK. He's done the Olympic Park and the gardens at the Barbican. And we knew that we needed someone that could translate this idea of a really lush garden on a rooftop and work with us to develop a planting scheme that was very tolerant of drought and could slightly be neglected because we knew that the maintenance budgets would be tight. This drawing that we did very early on with Nigel was a key drawing in trying to understand setting out of these gardens. We were very conscious that the garden should have a relationship with the tower and be part of the everyday life of the residents. This is the garden seen from the flats, and when you see it as an aerial view, like it feels like it's just a compositional bits of planting and paving, but actually, once you start looking into it a little bit more, you will understand it as a series of structural moves. This is the rooftop garden when we found it. And as soon as we won the competition, we did more investigation and we found out that the whole waterproofing was failing and that we would need to change absolutely all of it. So that, unfortunately, that ate most of our budget. So it meant that everything else that we had to do had to be incredibly thrifty. And we tried to focus on making 3 openings on the slab of the garden that connect the garden to the city. We wanted to see if we could use waterproofing as a material. We had used this type of waterproofing in previous projects, and we really enjoyed the fact that when you do alternate layers of waterproofing, the one in between is really brightly colored because so you know you've fully covered it. So we were toying with the idea of switching the order of the finishes and ending with the orange. And as soon as we started doing investigations into the structure, we found out that the slab was only about 100 mil thick, which is actually quite a big problem. If you want to have a very large garden, you need quite big planting depths. So we needed to invent a way of actually making soil depths work. At competition stage, as I said before, we had already made this decision that planting the only tree in the project in the ground and trying to anchor it through the first floor slab. And what we did was actually work with the existing building. So to achieve higher soil depths, we mounted the soil above columns and above beams and kind of flattened it wherever there wasn't enough capacity to carry extra load. This, in a way, produces this topography that allowed Nigel to design the planting scheme in relationship to soil depth. So, in a way, every action had a consequence. And we were very interested in making our interventions, in a way, quite difficult to date. So we started looking at references of the same period, and we really enjoyed the kind of pedestrian path of Alexandra Road, and we wanted to slightly kind of borrow from that language and use this engineering bricks as sets anchored within gravel. So I think the rest of the project I'm going to talk about these 3 openings. The first opening was for the tree, a very tight circular opening in the slab, and a pit just underneath it for the root ball of the tree. It had to be dug by hand because we couldn't get a digger underneath the very low clearance of the garages. There was a bit of an archaeological dig. It's quite interesting, that probably for us, not for the guy having to dig it by hand. And it's very exciting because as these halls started to be reformed, we started getting glimpses of the orange above, and we understood that these openings were key in making that relationship between the plane of the city, the ground, and the rooftop. So we craned the tree. It was quite tight. It's a sort of 15-meter tall Gleditsia tree that becomes this kind of emblem for the project. And it's anchored at ground level with the red gravel that talks about the garden above, and it also kind of graces the entrance of the studios. The tree creates a really nice shade in the top floor, because otherwise it's incredibly, it's a bit of a sun trap and it gets quite hot. So it's actually very useful, that tree, because it's placed towards the south, and it gives quite a lot of shade. The second opening is this public stair, which is kind of one of these big moves, and allowing people to join the garden. And we made a big opening and bent the rebar up. And we made an opening that was exactly the same size as one of the garages, because that was the simplest way of making a structural opening. We then cast this concrete stair. It's about 70% GGBS content, which means it's kind of quite low in carbon, but it had to be concrete because it's acting as a lateral brace for the whole building. This stair connects the city to the garden, and we reused the gates of the garage on the public side of the opening because it was the same size as the garage, so we used it as the gate. The third opening was for a big skylight in the middle of the plan, which made the really, really dark public room. It animated it during the day, and it allowed it to operate without much artificial lighting. So this is it. It's got two screens at either end. One inflected, one is flush. And this is the plan of the demolition. What we thought we should do, and the way we worked, was to make work with the grain of the building, to try and not try and do things that were not in the nature of the building. So we combined a couple of garages here to make a cafe on the corner. Here's a double studio. This top garage becomes a bin store for the whole tower and for the studios. And then there's another garage which becomes with WCs and kitchenette. The rest here are all studios. And in the middle, what used to be the drive-through becomes a really big public room. What we tried to do is reuse as much as possible, both from a sustainable point of view and also from a kind of budgetary point of view, and design the rooms as a collection of different rooms that had different qualities of natural light, and they could be reimagined as different programs throughout the lifespan of the building. So then the studios, we gave each studio a glazed screen and a door with a window, and on the other side, on the elevation, we gave each studio an openable window that frames the city. The window and the door is really low, and it's designed in a way so that you can see out only when you're sitting down in the studios and see across the whole building, but when people are walking around, there's a kind of privacy that's afforded to the people working in the studios. And we found that that worked really quite well because of the ceiling height to the downstand beams is just 2 meters. So it kind of brings the datum within that space lower down. And it makes you believe somehow subconsciously that the room is bigger than it is. On the outside, we focused on designing the thresholds. So I've already spoken about this stair that opens into the roundabout. To the south, we made a screen that folds in and makes a protection from the rain for people coming in and out of the studios. And the tree trunk graces this entrance. So the tree trunk becomes a column that is part of the sequence and perception of the people coming in and out of the studios, which we felt it was nice. And to support this hole for the tree, we had to introduce a column, this brick column. And in a way, what we thought is we would use the leftover bricks from the rest of the project, and then we would arrange them in a way that it would bring a certain ornament and a certain character. The back is a very flush screen, so this has a hierarchy of a front and a back. It's very clear where it's more public and where it's more of a secondary entrance. And this central room that you can see through, it's a great public room. And the studios have been in use since September 2021. And Forma have been organizing a series of fantastic events, both inside and outside. But I just wanted to finish this presentation with this drawing. This drawing is that I showed before, in which we see the project as part of a series of interventions in the city, and hoping that this project will be a catalyst for this next proposal of the roundabout and for years to come. Thank you.